Now we have an exclusive Fireside chat. It's going to be on the topic shaping the next generation of vehicles. Tomorrow's vehicles will be built with electric, autonomous, and mobility-connected features. What will this future look like, and how are we going to achieve this? For answers, I would like to call upon Radin Rahimzadeh, CEO of Ford Transit Inc., and William Marsh, founder and CEO of Vela Motor Company. Please welcome them with a round of applause.
Hello, testing. Okay, well, thank you for having us. Our topic we'll be discussing today, as was outlined, is what's going to be happening in the future. Super excited. We wanted to start off a little bit by telling you a little bit about us and our backgrounds and why this might be relevant for what we're working on. Why don't you start off by telling us what was your motivation with the innovation that you guys are working on, specifically in the automotive space, and how did you get that all started? What's the backstory?
The COVID-19 pandemic. So what's really fascinating is for entrepreneurs, right, is you look around the world during even tougher times and during these unfortunate, calamities, and you try to do something different. And my background was in deploying connected and autonomous vehicles with, OEMs, local partners, with, federal agencies. We kind of had the whole ecosystem of folks focused on shaping the next generation of vehicles. And I noticed that it was going to take a very long time. But the positive and beneficial factors of these vehicles is so immense that I wanted them today, right? And when the pandemic hit here in California, where I'm from, everything stopped for a few months. Freight, personal transit, and transportation, and the air quality was so wonderful. The birds were chirping, and that was noticeable, and I wanted to continue that effect. So, not having a 45-minute commute to work, I started to kind of think about what can we do in order to maintain and sustain this kind of moment in time. And we started looking at different vehicles and noticed that somewhere where we can have the greatest impact is with heavy-duty vehicles, Class 7, Class 8 vehicles. And the easiest way to create the biggest impact is in aftermarket attachments. So different types of trailer fairings, such as side skirts, etc. And we also look to inspiration at different aerodynamic objects in this world. And we were really inspired by the golf ball. As you guys know, the golf ball has dimples, right? Little shapes all over, and that allows for the ball to extend beyond what a normal and smooth ball could. And we decided to try different types of designs for first trailer skirts, and then we invented a second type of fairing that's very novel and unique. So we have 2 patents on new and novel designs for aerodynamic kits for trucks. And what we were able to do, thinking outside the box and something that's already on the market, is improve efficiencies over 150%. And, you know, these trailer fairings are on the market, and no one really, you know, takes a second look at them. And so by being able to think deliberately about what's currently on the market today, we're able to kind of have these incredible impacts for the immediate future and also for the electric and, you know, autonomous future to come. So that was our inspiration. And I know you've kind of been on the market a little bit longer, so your kind of starting point looks a little bit different. Tell us about that.
Yeah, thank you. That is awesome story. Yeah, our backstory is my partner. He is a tinkerer by nature. He just loves to break things apart, take a look at them. He has a background in engineering, and so he was working with his son, who's a triathlete, so he loves to be out there running. And one of his most challenging events was the bicycle portion of it. He never did very good at that. And so he was looking at the bicycle, studying the bicycle, and it dawned on him that part of the inspiration for the internal combustion engine was actually the bicycle. You have the piston, the connecting rod, and the crankshaft, and he was asking the question, why does the explosion that happens in an internal combustion engine happen before the piston reaches top dead center? You would never do that in a bicycle. Why do we do that in the internal combustion engine? And after delving deeper into that, he started to realize that most of the energy from the explosion that happens actually gets driven into the mechanical components of the engine and causes friction and heat. Try to say that in the same word. And so he got to work, started looking at what the possibilities were to actually implement a fix to this. And that's when I got involved. My background's on the business consulting side of things. I was a business consultant for many, many years. And he came to me with the idea, and I asked him a few questions and told him he needs to create a business model around it, or otherwise it wasn't going to go anywhere. So a few days later, he came back and said, "Hey, would you like to partner with me?" So that was a great opportunity for me to get into the mind of somebody that looks at these things, like many of the people here, looks at what is the actual problem and how do we actually fix it. So it's been quite a journey. We've been at this or he's been at it for close to a decade. I got involved with it about 5 years ago, and we've done a lot of work to get us to the point where we are now, which is essentially to where we have patents, we're prototyping, and showing that we increase fuel efficiency in all internal combustion engines, not just automotive, but anything from a lawnmower all the way up to an ocean liner. Kind of improves the fuel efficiency by double. So essentially, if your big rig gets 10 miles to the gallon, we could double that to 20 miles per gallon. Or if your family car gets 30 miles to the gallon, we can now get 60 miles per gallon, which changes the whole dynamic of what the future could actually look like. We don't have to be focused on potentially just EV or just internal combustion engine. We have an opportunity to create hybrid systems that actually will allow us to move forward. So we're definitely excited about where the future is heading.
That's pretty incredible. Just a little bit of tinkering, right, has created this whole new way and revolutionizing something that, again, is presently used today, right? Speaking kind of about the different types of vehicles that you're envisioning that don't have to be just EV or just hydrogen or just, as we're all kind of thinking about this, where do you see the future of engines and also fuel types going? In which direction? And not just where do you see, but where do you practically see them going?
Right, and I think that's the key. We don't have to look 10, 20, 30 years in the future. We can look right now, right? What can we do right now to solve the actual problem? And we need to ask ourselves, what is that actual problem? The actual problem is climate change. You're trying to solve that problem as well as we are. The EV community is trying to solve that problem as well. But the reality is it is going to take a collaboration for us to be able to solve the complex issue that we started in the first place. So we need to look at this from all angles. First of all, let's consider the commonly held belief of where we're going right now, that all mobility in the future has to be EV, right? Because it's clean tech. If we really look at EVs from a holistic standpoint, the reality is it's not as clean as we have been led to believe. In fact, we have started to see an adjustment in how advertisement has actually being portrayed this technology, to going from zero emissions to zero local emissions, or zero emissions produced by this vehicle. And the reality is all the battery technology that goes into this, it costs CO2 to deliver a battery pack to the car. It takes, unless you're 100% renewable energy plugging into your vehicle, that also produces CO2, not where you're driving, but where it is that energy or electricity is being produced. So we need to take a look at, are we solving the overarching problem? And if the answer is yes, then great. Then we move forward with that technology. If it's no, what do we need to do to solve the actual problem we're going after, which is climate change? And so that's one of the areas that we've focused a lot of our time and attention, is how can we couple what we call smart stroke technology, the technology that we're producing at this point. How do we couple that with other technologies to get us to that next level? And what we found is we have to look at the entire picture. So let's perhaps look at EV vehicles for a second. To produce a 100 kilowatt hour battery, it takes roughly about 17.5 tons of CO2 to produce that battery. We can't just disregard it and say that doesn't exist. It does exist. We have to take that into consideration. Also, when you plug in, they say MPGE, and we need to consider where the source of that electricity is coming from. And so if we look at that holistically, EV that uses a 100 kilowatt power source, it would take the equivalent of about 4 to 5 years of a gas engine car that runs on just regular gas. Take about 4 to 5 years for that gas engine to produce as much CO2 as that EV vehicle actually did. Or we take it a little bit further. If we have hybrid technology, maybe we're getting 45 miles to the gallon. Now we're taking that to 6 to 7 years to where we're equaling the level of CO2 output. And yeah, in the long term, EVs actually make more sense as they'll produce less, or they'll actually use less CO2. But if we couple that with smart stroke technology, with implements like you're considering, now we're talking about a car that previously got 30 miles per gallon getting 60 miles per gallon. Now we're talking about, what do we got here? It's about 9 years. And if we took that same technology and put it in a hybrid vehicle, now we're getting 90 miles per gallon, which, again, if we look at the numbers, it takes close to 20 years before EVs would actually surpass the hybrid technology. So if we're actually looking to solve the problem of climate change, we need to look at this as a holistic picture. And you had mentioned fuel types. If we look at even biofuels, net zero, that's something that could be implemented right now. Biofuels exist right now. We could use them right now. And that could definitely improve our climate situation versus any other technology, especially if we're using hybrid with smart stroke technology. So there's definitely a lot of room and opportunity there for us to look at multiple options. In fact, just at lunch, I was talking to someone, and they have a hydrogen generator that's, they were telling me it's the most sophisticated on the market, and you install it directly in your vehicle, and you could run your, we could even introduce a system like that to where we have multiple systems now in our future vehicles, where it's not just electric, it's not just hydrogen, it's not just biofuels, it's a combination of many, many different things to run our vehicles. So tell me a little bit about where you guys see where you see the future, and where you see things happening as far as where we go.
Sure. I think something I want to underscore that you shared with us is, and you distilled, is that focus on climate change, right? And that has to be, you know, from the startup perspective, our mission is to change the world, right? We're outside of these big corporate structures, and you know, it doesn't take a lot for us to be able to test and iterate our ideas without multiple, you know, approvals and budgets and this and that. So we're in a very unique position to, you know, have that ambition as well as, you know, make it happen. And for the future of vehicles, it really has to be in that company's DNA, right? Climate change. And what I kind of noticed with, you know, the ecosystem of partners that we worked with, both in the testing proving grounds based out in Concord, California, as well as in our pilot deployments when we, you know, were in private roads or public roads, et cetera, is that from the startup perspective, folks were, you know, and as is reasonable, shifting their business models, focuses, et cetera, to what was happening in that ecosystem. So if an investor says one thing, oh, yes, 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 you know, we can do that, absolutely. Slight pivot, change, shift, right? If it's a local government agency saying, well, we're excited about this, and this is what we want on our roads, a shift and a pivot towards that. But I think in order for us to have the impact that we want, both of our companies, and I think that's where I loved having this conversation with you, is like the very ardent kind of commitment to climate change and being flexible with involving and thinking about how to optimize and maximize different alternatives, alternative fuels, is that focus. And for Ford Transit, we have a very, you know, unique position in that we can be agnostic to all of this. Having aftermarket fairings because our focus is the vehicle shape itself, right? It can, optimize any type of fuel or energy source used. And so when we run our simulations, actually, we've been testing out, what does it look like if we have a hydrogen future? What does it look like if we have an EV future? And in conversations with different manufacturers and such who are, focusing holistically on one fuel type, whether it's or energy type, whether it's EVs or now hydrogen, we find that there might not be enough resources to realize full fleets, at least across a country as big as the United States, with just one source. And that hybrid future is what is starting to make a lot of sense. Because will we have enough hydrogen, at least in the short term, right, to supply all of our fleets? Will all of our communities be able and have the infrastructure and the capacity to, have to be fully electrified? And so that's kind of where we need to focus, is the goal, climate change, and then the solution being optimizing a whole portfolio of solutions for our future fleets. And then one last kind of note, which is really interesting for fairings. I know there's a couple of folks in the trucking industry out there, but a 1% change in aerodynamics results in thousands of dollars saved, right? So when we look at how can we really stretch the fuel types of now and the future, we also have to be thinking about the design of our vehicles, and how, not just for us, we'd love to stay in business and forever sell aftermarket parts, but how can we design our future freight vehicles to be more optimized in terms of aerodynamics, so that they can take any fuel source in a longer way? And in order to kind of stay in business, what we've done is build a IoT box that dynamically captures air quality data. So we noticed an opportunity here that, various fleets of buses or even trucks that are going in repeated routes can capture really critical and vital neighborhood level air quality data. So with having climate as being our overarching goal motivator, we also have these attachments that we can support public agencies in better decision making, as well as fleets, in order to see their impact in the communities that they are kind of traversing in. So that's kind of where we're at, and holding that goal really close as our North Star.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It sounds like we're definitely aligned in that way. So we talked a little bit about hydrogen, potentially biofuels. Do you see any, where do you kind of see, as far as vehicle types, how your technology may be able to be used outside of the transportation? Is there any area for that, or what's kind of your focus there?
Sure. I'm actually going to lean into my previous role as a AV consultant and bring back something that you had said, which is along the lines of systems thinking, right? And kind of defining what the actual question is, and what, having that guide us towards achieving our goals. What we notice is that 29% of pollution and greenhouse gases in the United States is coming from the transportation sector, right? And this is a little bit tangential, and 58% of that 29% comes from personal vehicles. So when we kind of think about the future of transportation and where we can make the biggest impact, is kind of what you folks are doing too, is changing the kind of internal parts of family-owned vehicles as well, right? Because they're always on the roads and they're kind of the biggest contributors, single occupant vehicles, to our climate crisis. And in my previous role, we had that question of where can we make the biggest impact, and it wasn't to shift folks from combustion engines and gasoline to EVs. It was, how do we inspire and motivate folks to move out of their vehicle completely and then move into shared and autonomous vehicles, move into, dynamic personal mass transit vehicles, and connect them to our greater backbone of transit infrastructure, so light rail, as well as subway systems, et cetera, and actually getting folks, off of the road in order to make that bigger impact. So when we look at, which fuel types to use, or, what the kind of engines of the future will look like, it's how do we create a mixed portfolio so that we can maximize our resources, be it hydrogen, electricity, et cetera, and have folks just rely less on, any type of resource, and, maximize and optimize what we currently have, and which works for the climate, which is mass transit. So that's a little bit of a tangent, because for transit, I think our biggest impact is for trucks, right? And then where our technology can kind of slide across different sectors is with our IoT device, because you can't change what you can't, see, and you have to measure that to be able to see it. So I don't know if that kind of answers that question in a very direct way, but
yes, thank you.
yeah.
Alrighty, so just to pick up a little bit on what we were talking about, the future of transportation can't just be one thing. I think we can all agree on that. We have to consider hybrid, not just hybrid in our vehicles, but we also have to consider changing our actual attitudes and habits of how we think about transportation in general. Fuel types, those are going to change. Obviously, hydrogen has been a big buzzword lately in the industry. That's only going to get stronger and stronger as time goes on. As that technology becomes more and more mature, we are going to see a mass change. Now, what is going to drive many people to change is their ability to pay for it, right? So if we have a choice between a gas engine, $10,000, $15,000 cheap in comparison to a $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 EV or whatever, people will do what's economically viable for them. So we need to have a holistic approach to how we change transit as a whole. We need to start from every level, from motorcycles all the way through the system up to trains, planes, and ocean liners. How can we affect all of that? And that's really the conversation that we're embarking on today with you, is to start to think about holistically, how do we make those changes? How do we say we're going to create the best system that really affects our world in a positive way, not just for short term, not just long term. What can we affect now that's going to take us into the future? I believe that that is through hybrid technology. So a combination of electric and internal combustion engine, I think, is going to be around for a very, very long time. We can look at what the manufacturers are doing, right? Toyota right now is testing a direct injection hydrogen engine. BMW has tested that technology. They all have hybrid vehicles. And the reason why is because that really is the future, regardless of one affiliation to one particular brand or another. Those who actually focus on the problem seem to always go to the same conclusion, which is that hybrid technology really is where we're heading in the future, and coupling that technology with the proper fuels, we actually can fix this problem right now. We don't have to wait 20 or 30 years to do it.
Absolutely, and it's also a supply problem as well, because even if you create the demand and you educate your populations and your consumers and your companies, et cetera, it always comes down to a matter of supply. Will there be enough of whatever you're focusing on, to fully integrate and to create, these seamless operations? And I think affordability, like what you said, absolutely is critical. And then there's two other points that come to mind, especially with our experience with the fairings and being a very kind of novel product now on the market and trying to test and pilot with different folks. The question of safety has come up. So with any innovation, whether you are, a level 4 or 5 autonomous vehicle, or you are a trailer fairing that most people are familiar with, the first reaction question, what have you, will always be, is it safe? Is it safe if I'm going 65 miles an hour on the freeway? Will your fairing stay and remain there? Is it safe if my kids are crossing the streets and there's an autonomous shuttle, right, carrying multiple passengers? And so I think safety is another consideration that always has to be, in the underlying motivation for everyone, for you folks as well. I know it's, being new and novel. Have you received any questions about how well you do and kind of, while operating?
Yes, that's one of the first questions that it seems to always come up as we've gone into conversations with the different OEMs is, longevity, safety, implementation. How much does it cost? And obviously, does it work? And it has been a eye-opening experience to see how each of them think about these different areas differently. To one, safety is primary, and for us, since ours is inside of the beating heart of the engine, if you will, they actually have focused more on longevity with the innovation that we are bringing to market. They want to make sure that their product that they sell is going to be on the road tomorrow and 3 years, 10 years, and hopefully longer down the road. And so we've done quite a bit of testing around that, so we can help alleviate concerns and help them to understand a little bit better that yes, this actually, the Smart Stroke technology that we're presenting is very much a new innovation that solves a very particular problem, and yes, the components can be made strong and safe, and that conversation's gone over very well. I believe with what you're doing, since it is an aftermarket, that is safety definitely is probably one of the more poignant concerns that they have, I would imagine.
And that we have too.
I'm sure, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And the second kind of thing that came to mind, I did mention I have 2 points, is accessibility. And that comes in the shape and form of implementation, right? Is it accessible for, your customers and my customers to be able to implement and also, seamlessly integrate within the operations or within the systems architecture of the vehicle, et cetera, as, easily, so you're not creating, great disturbances for your clients. And then kind of just to bring it back to the future of, connected and autonomous and all of that is, accessibility concerns in vehicle design. For a lot of startups and manufacturers, in the beginning of this revolution, it was very much an afterthought of, who the user actually is and the diverse needs and preferences of the user, as well as how they will interact with, accessing that vehicle through an app or, how to call it up or what have you. So for the implementation of, anything, whether we're adding on to a vehicle that's existing or whether it's a whole new system and hardware, is accessibility for, and thinking about it holistically, as you said, with regards to anything, of who the end user is, and just creating ease, right? It's a whole new thing, and we're excited about it, right? It's futuristic, but is it feasible? Is it accessible? Does it create convenience for, anyone who will come into contact with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe we've got about 10 minutes left. Is that all right? Okay. All right, sounds good. So just one little last thing just to wrap it up. Why don't you just maybe explain a little bit more about where you are, where your company's going, and how potentially we might be able to help you achieve your goals.
Thank you. I was going to take a break from talking, but I appreciate that question. So that's a great slide. Both kind of William and I have put up a tiny bit of our next step, as well as how to get in touch with us if you find that we can be of help to you folks as well, and we can partner and create kind of collaborative opportunities. Where we are right now is, we've done a whole ton of simulation testing, about 4 hours worth of it, 4,000 hours worth of it. I wouldn't trust me if it was only 4. And, we have prototypes situated for some smaller vehicles. Our next step is to get into the real world, right? Partner with the big Class 7 and Class 8 trucking folks, either owners or operators, install our technology and really show them the magic of it, truly. And so, if there's anyone in the audience who wants to test this out, we are talking to a few folks, and we have a great team that can be spread all across the United States. So we're not, constrained to the California area. We're happy to, come and install one of these things and save you money and, help you also create an impact for the environment. Where are you guys at, being 5 years kind of into this?
Yeah. So we have our working prototype, doing a lot of testing, longevity testing with prototype. The OEMs that we've spoken with all would like us to test what they're doing on their engines. So we're in a point where we have bootstrapped our what we've done up to this point, and we are currently put together a crowdfunding campaign so that we can do that additional testing that the OEMs are looking for, so that they can and we can verify that our claims are actually true. And so we've also partnered with the Department of Energy and a couple of local universities to do third-party testing for us, so that they can generate their own data, that non-biased data, so that we can get out there. I don't know if you can put that slide back up there, but that's a little bit about where we're at. So again, if anyone in the audience may have connections that would be helpful, we'd love to work with you and help you in any way that we can, and hopefully that can be reciprocated. Do we want to open it up for questions, or do you have any?
Sure, and I just want to say that's really inspiring, from tinkering, on a bicycle to partnerships with the Department of Energy and kind of seeing that trajectory. That's incredible. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we have a question over there.
Thank you. It's been great meeting both of you during this conference. I love that this is talking about the future of automotives, and I love that you've shifted my perspective to understand that part of equipping the future is bringing the past up to speed as well. And so I think a lot of people that I'm connected to are so future-oriented, thinking about what does the next wave need to look like, and I love that you're saying, here's how we re-equip everything else that we have already produced. So thank you for doing that. I want to set up this question. So the way that I want to ask this question is from a sales perspective. So I do electric vehicle chargers. So I know that our desired outcome is sustainability of the planet, and that's to get to a point where there's harmony between technology, our life, and nature that already exists. I'm a big fan of hiding the medicine in the cheese, which is like, how do you put what people actually need hidden inside of what they want? And I know that what that means effectively is, what are the value propositions? And so my question for you is, when it comes to decision makers and consumers, I love that you're saying we don't want to become overly reliant on one source of energy. And there's obvious value props like you save money on gas. And then there's not so obvious value props like when we have autonomous vehicles, you can convert some of these parking lots into more commercial property, and that will be available for you to have tenants, et cetera. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some other ways that we can entice people to hop on board with the future of creating sustainable vehicle transportation? What are some things that are important to the consumer or important to the decision makers in business roles?
Thank you for the question. First of all, we need to realize that consumers are not just middle class to rich. Our consumers are everybody that has access to some sort of engine that produces CO2, whether that's a lawnmower, a chainsaw, or whatever. And so for us to be able to say, we can help fix the problem by adjusting a component in your engine is a big deal. We can literally, by changing a component in the engines around the world, we could literally be removing 7 to 8 billion tons of carbon from our atmosphere right now. We don't have to wait 20 years. We don't have to wait till 2050. We could do that right now, and we could do that cheaply and expensively, and it could be across the entire planet. We just have to take that initiative to do that. Now, a lot of some things that governments have done is subsidized. In this case, the EV industry, getting that started, which is great, but it really subsidized middle class and rich families. What we need to do is take that to a much broader level and say any engine that is CO2 producing, we need to subsidize the adjustment to something that actually is better for our environment. That same amount that we spent on EV vehicles, we could literally be saving billions of tons in carbon every year by that same amount that we've put into EV vehicles up to this point.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, I think that, again, our unique position is, being able to be outside of certain systems, right? And look at things a little bit differently. And when you are in conversations, for us with our clients or public agencies, with different, environmental agencies, we find that certain narratives are really heavy set, right, and have influence, and folks, kind of don't reach beyond those narratives. We get pretty comfortable in, certain things that we start to learn about or know about, and they kind of carry out through how we think about innovations or the aspects of innovation, such as the safety, affordability, accessibility, et cetera. And it really takes reflection for the consumer, for the owner, operator, decision maker, customer, and for our governing systems. And what we can do is help accelerate and deepen those reflections as startups. So, for example, what we do is at Ford Transit is that IoT box, right? It is a really big hassle for us to put this together, and it was at first very expensive. IoT devices are insanely expensive in order for reads and receipts of data and information. But we know that it's critical and imperative, and we have a great opportunity to collaborate with our partners and have them kind of reach beyond their day-to-day operations in order to get these measurements, these data points, et cetera, and pass those along and collaborate then with public agencies to say, this is what's happening at the neighborhood level, and then come and collaborate together, with this information at hand. So the value proposition comes out of these reflections, right? Because as you nailed it so astutely, it is right now, how do we, increase our operating budgets, as well as, how do we, because there's this climate discussion happening and with the new administration and everything, how do we kind of align our goals more or less to that? But it's what happens in between that reflection to kind of really profoundly and, have that commitment is necessary. And we're, as startups, we're here to help with that.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
Just a question about your analysis on the different fuel types and the amount of emissions over the lifespan of that system. I was just curious if you've taken into account the lifespan of each one of those systems as a whole, and what happens to that system when it's reached its end of life. So basically, when we're talking about EVs versus ICEs, the longevity of each one of the propulsion methods and or the energy sources. I say electricity is a somewhat renewable resource at some level, right? We can use photovoltaics or, 1,000 different ways. But there's nothing like that for any fossil fuels, even like hydrogen. So I was just wondering if you've taken into consideration the lifespan of the components and the systems as a whole. So like even let's say in an EV battery, once it's at the end of its life, is that the end of its life? Are we able to recycle it? Are we recycling it? And which ways? Is it reusable, or do we have to break it down in a process, add more money into it to get that stuff out? So.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. There are several different types of fuels that are renewable. Biofuels, for example. We can create, absolutely, and we call that net zero fuels. Also, hydrogen. We've got different classifications of hydrogen. We've got black, gray, blue, and green. Green hydrogen is processed through electrolysis. So we absolutely can, that is an absolute renewable resource that, in fact, many of the governments of the world are heading in that direction over electric, over batteries. Why? Because it's a storage of energy, just like a battery. Hydrogen, it stores energy. And we can utilize that energy not just in vehicles that go on the ground. We can put that in airplanes. We can put hydrogen into ocean-faring vessels that batteries just don't make sense. We could put the hydrogen into multiple different types of platforms, such as the transportation industry, where you've got truckers that don't have time to recharge, or the inconvenience that would cause. If we're looking holistically at the future, electricity obviously is a absolutely important component to that. There's no question about that. But is it electric on its own? And the reality is it's probably not. The reality is it's going to be some hybrid system that we can use other renewables or net zero fuels to actually run those machines.
Not work. Oh, there we go. How do you overcome the volatility of some of the other alternative fuels? That's just a pure question. I found that even with the EVs, the volatility of lithium batteries in a car is a very hard subject and sell to some people. So wondering if you've thought about how, let's say, hydrogen is going to impact the future and its volatility.
Are you talking about, you're not talking price, you're talking explosivity,
right?
Correct?
Yeah, safety.
Safety-wise, yeah, absolutely. So in development right now are tanks that are being approved for vehicles that have a very, very good safety track record. In fact, they've had similar tanks for decades. So it's not a new technology. Hydrogen has been around for a very long time. It's the fundamental element in our universe, obviously, and so it's something that we realize there is an explosive aspect to it, just as there is with gasoline or lithium-ion batteries. The reality is, how do we mitigate that, and how does that compare with other elements? So that's a good question. That is definitely something that we would invite collaboration and conversation about. Thank you.
Hi. My question is more related to IoT devices and connectivity you just mentioned. Just want to understand when you said it's costly, is the devices costly, infrastructure is costly, what exactly you mean costly here? Second thing is like, what are the challenges in adoption of connectivity in vehicles? And third one is, how much penetration you do see in vehicle connectivity right now in North America?
Fantastic questions. You will have to remind me of the last two again. But in respect to the first question, the actual hardware itself, not expensive, right? There's a lot of aftermarket sensors that are very cheap. And it's really great, too, because you can have anyone tinkering with IoT hardware. It's the communications component of it, as I said, the read and the receipt of data and the, basically in the sending of it to the servers that is very expensive. And why it hasn't been done, to date dynamically is because of that. And where I'm very lucky is that my CTO is brilliant and can code very elegantly. And so he's kind of created some kind of workarounds to the expenses. So we've dramatically reduced the cost of this. The second question, could you please remind me?
Yeah, what the challenges do you see in adoption of connectivity in the vehicles?
Of vehicles? Everything as it currently stands. It's, parallel discussion of should we be using, like DSRC communications or whether we should be using 5G and cellular. So that in itself is at the federal level, right? And secondly, it's pairing things. So every locality and city, municipality has different types of infrastructure. So there's no, one standard solution to pairing the vehicle with the existing traffic infrastructure, as well as what's going to be challenging is when you have a mix of autonomous vehicles, and if there are no set standards and communications, then that's going to be difficult to pair as well and to communicate. And the third question?
So in terms of penetration, I believe most of the fleets or you say commercial vehicles are now connected via OBD dongle or telematics or GPS tracker. So what's your say, how much market is being covered? Every other car or, every other fleet vehicle is connected, or you do see the penetration has to adopt?
Could you elaborate a little bit more, please?
So I'm saying, when you talk about the basic connectivity, like telematics, OBD, there are plenty of telematics provider are there. They put a device on your vehicle. You can track their routes. They can tell you if there's a flag in your engine, any error coming up. So that's a market. It's already there from last decade, but right now it's ramping up. So I just want to understand how much penetration has taken place when it comes to connectivity of that basic connectivity. People are getting aware about these cars at least are connected on internet. I'm so confusing you so much.
No. I think I am on the same page as you right now. You're absolutely right. This is decades long, right, with the telematics industry that this is happening. And I think that right now, what's interesting with autonomous vehicles is that currently everything is a preset route, right? And that's kind of where the focus is. So it's actually not, for most pilots, they're not at that stage from what we're seeing. The testing and the piloting is being done with pre-programmed routes and communication. So I think this is the next stage, as kind of you astutely pointed out. where we'll be seeing a lot of development then. Right now, as it currently stands, the conversation is more around safety and different car components such as vision and LiDAR, et cetera, to make sure that the vehicle itself is pretty safe. And we can have a conversation after this as well, in case I didn't cover what you had asked.
All righty, I believe that wraps it up for us. Thank you so much, and we'll turn it back over to ITAS.
Thank you, everyone.